Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. Today I wanted to address what I believe to be the three most common and untrue homeschool myths. Homeschooling is growing in popularity by leaps and bounds, and that's not a secret. Everyone can see it being mentioned everywhere around them. But unfortunately, some of the homeschool myths that have been perpetuated over the years are still being pushed, despite the fact that so many more people are actually being homeschooled now, and people should know better. But I'm going to try to at least dispel some of them. It might help, it might not, but I think it's important that we get the truth out there. Now, since there are so many homeschooling myths, I'm not going to address all of them because I could be here all day because some of them are doozies. I just really wanted to talk about the three that I have been seeing, especially on Twitter, the most, because I think that it's important that we get the truth out about this. Unfortunately, a lot of parents who are looking into homeschooling might see comments by people who really don't know anything about homeschooling. They might not even know any homeschooling families. They just repeat the information that they read on the internet or that other people tell them. But new homeschooling, not homeschooling, but parents who might be thinking of homeschooling could look at those and they could think, maybe homeschooling isn't something that I want to do for my kids because, I want them to have friends, or because we might not be able to afford it, or because we didn't have a whole lot of fun during the pandemic schooling. And so that was a glimpse into what the three myths are that I'm going to be talking about today. So the first one is that homeschooled children are not socialized. This is the number one myth that I see coming up all the time. Even people who claim to be in favor of homeschooling will often say, well, I think that homeschooling is a wonderful thing and it's great that you're doing it, but make sure that your kids get socialized. First of all, children are not dogs. We socialize dogs. So I think it's important to get that out of the way. But I think what a lot of people mean by that is that they see children in school all day long with other children. And for some reason, there's this idea that children that are homeschooled are never going to make friends because, I don't know, maybe people think that school is the only place for children to meet other children. It's not the case. And I think that most of us, if we actually were honest with ourselves and sat down to think about it, even if you are one of the people saying that, in your heart that kids can make friends anywhere. Children can make friends at church. They can make friends in their neighborhoods. They can make friends on sports teams or extracurricular activities that they take. They could make friends at the library. There are so many different areas. And, not even to mention the fact that a lot of children have cousins who are around the same age as they are. Now, I've been talking about children with other children the same age as them just because I mentioned it when it comes to the school and the classroom setting. But age is not important when it comes to children developing proper social skills. That's another way that a lot of people say it. Homeschool students will not develop proper social skills. Actually, they do. I would say for the most part, yes, there are always, extremes of both ends. There were some children that I went to public school with who were very, very, very introverted, who never talked to anyone. So, there really are children on both sides of the spectrum when it comes to both sides of schooling. But if you're actually going to talk about social skills, how many people in the real world only ever interact with people the exact same age as them and who live in the exact same neighborhood as them? Not a whole lot. It doesn't happen when you're out in the community, at the grocery store, at the bank. It doesn't happen at work. So why do people think that it has to happen when children are learning? Well, because that's the only thing that they know. Most people have gone to a traditional school, so they envision a classroom of children the same age. But that doesn't mean that that's the way that it should be. The reason that the classrooms are age segregated is because our school system is following the Prussian model of education, which is more of an assembly line to train obedient citizens. Yeah, I talked about that in another video, so I'm not going to get into that today. I will leave a link to that video in the description box if you weren't aware of that. I think most of you probably are, especially if you have read anything by John Taylor Gatto. He really dove extensively into the history of American education. That's actually the name of one of his books. But the fact is that right now, 6 of my children are still being homeschooled. I just graduated another one 2 months ago, so she's 18 now, and I have graduated now 4 homeschoolers. My oldest graduated from public school, and I still have 6 children who are being homeschooled now. And they all have friends. They all have friends of all ages. And you know what? They're all pretty darn good at interacting with people of all ages. Why? Because while school students are in a classroom all day with children the same ages as them, my children are usually following me around, doing the daily things that I need to do, and they are interacting with people of all ages. We just had a graduation party, an 8/18th birthday party for my oldest daughter who lives at home. I have 4 other older children who don't live at home anymore, but right now my 18-year-old is the oldest one. So yeah, over the weekend we had that party for her, and this unsocialized homeschooler had 50 people at her graduation party. And while we were there, my 12-year-old, there were a bunch of children the same age as her, and she played with them off and on, but I also saw her just bouncing around from adult to adult, having a good old time, just having normal conversations, even with women of all ages, women in their 40s, women in their 20s, kids her own age, a friend of mine who was in her 60s. And it came very naturally to her because it is something that she is so used to. Another example is that I have the same daughter, actually. She just left yesterday. She is at camp right now. She's going to be at camp all week. And guess what? She actually requested that 2 of her friends, yeah, she's a homeschooler, she's got friends, that 2 of her friends would be in the same cabin as her. Same situation 2 weeks ago when my 14-year-old son was at camp. He had requested, or a friend of his requested for him to be in the same cabin. Another daughter, my 16-year-old, next week is going to Rehoboth Beach for the week with a friend and her family. So the whole notion that homeschooled students never interact with anyone and don't leave their homes, really just think about that as a very extreme case that you probably will never meet anyone who actually behaves in that way in a homeschool setting. So let's just, push that out of the way right now. Homeschool students do learn social skills. They learn social skills that are good across the board, not just in, a same age setting or an age segregated setting. Okay, so the second one is that homeschooling is for the rich. This one always gets me when I see people say that homeschooling is for the rich, or sometimes they will say that it is only for the privileged, and they are talking about the wealthy, the financially privileged. Let me tell you something. Like I've mentioned before, I have 7 of my children still living at home with me, and then it's my husband and myself, so we have 9 people in our home. We live in a 760 square foot house. We are by no means wealthy. My husband is a blue-collar worker. He's not out there making 6 figures. And the little stipend that I get from making my videos here really is a drop in the bucket. But when it comes to our children, they come first, and they have been coming first their whole lives, and especially in these last 14 years that we have been homeschooling. Yes, we've been doing it for 14 years. And at one point, 10 of our children were being homeschooled at one time. So first of all, I was actually reading something, I don't remember where it was, but they had a chart. I looked for it. I wish that I could find it. If I do, I'll link it in the description box. But it actually showed that demographically speaking, most homeschoolers nowadays are in like a lower middle class income and are not wealthy. The biggest percentage of homeschooling families are actually lower middle class. I think when it comes to it is a lot of people kind of just push the thought out of their mind when they say that they could never afford to homeschool. Sometimes it's because they've heard other people say it so much that, again, like what I was talking about before, they start to believe the myths. They think that they would never be able to do it because they're not wealthy. So why should we even look into homeschooling? I think that parents don't put enough time into actually thinking about how they could do something. There's an old saying, and I'm not sure who said it, and a lot of people don't like when I say this, but I think that it's very true. The saying goes, he who wants to do something will find a way. He who doesn't will find an excuse. And so a lot of people will say that they would love to homeschool their children, but honestly, they probably really don't want to do it. So they have never sat down to think about, how could we lower our budget? How could we kind of smush everything together, or maybe cut costs actually is a better way of doing this. How could we cut costs so that we would be able to afford to keep our children home? And unfortunately, that's not something that people do. I think that it's really important that parents start looking at the difference between wants and needs. Nowadays, people don't understand the difference. They look at things and they think they need them. They think they need 2 cars. Now, I have to say that in some families who have children, or the parents themselves who have medical needs, then yes, in those cases, maybe there is a need for 2 cars. I will say, though, that the majority of people do not need 2 cars. They just want them because it's more convenient. A lot of people think that they need an expensive new car with a car payment, when in actuality, you could get yourself a good used car that you don't have to make any car payments on. You own that car outright, and there is another bill slashed from your budget. Do you actually need cable? Do you need the newest cell phone every time that it comes out? Do you need to go on really expensive family vacations, cruises, renting out extravagant beach houses, or even like traveling to Mexico together? Yes, those are all beautiful trips. But if you are wanting to homeschool your children and you're trying to way to fit that into your budget, yeah, there are going to come times when you do need to cut costs like this, because as fun as stuff like that is, your children need to come first. And, that really comes into not eating out as much, not buying as many clothes as you would. And that's one thing that I really had a hard time with, because I was always my mom used to call me a clothes horse. I had so much clothing. I think that I was lucky if I would wear the same outfit twice in a school year. And so that was something that I had to learn, is that you don't need as much clothing as you think you do. You don't need the latest designer. You don't need the latest thing of everything. Again, your eyes need to be on your children. Now, it's also important to say that there are also families from all walks of life who homeschool. So yes, it is definitely a blessing to have both parents at home and to be able to have the mother stay home and the father work while the mother homeschools. Yes, that is the ideal situation. There are instances, though, where the mother might stay at home, or the father, and they could even work from home. Like, what I do here, I wouldn't necessarily consider it working from home, but I do earn an income to help my husband. And so it's not that I am just a stay-at-home mom. I am doing something to help my husband because it is necessary. And if you are innovative, you can find ways to use your talents to help out if you need to also. I also know single mothers who either work from home. Some of them have been really creative with the ideas that they've come up with in ways that they earn money on the side, whether it's opening an Etsy shop or selling jewelry, maybe baking things and selling them to different people. It's amazing. It goes back to that quote, he who wants to do something will find a way. He who doesn't will find an excuse. If you want to do it, you're going to find a way. Okay, there are probably just a very tiny fraction of situations where there's just absolutely no way that it's going to happen. But if you look at most people, when they think of homeschooling, they automatically put themselves in the category of, oh, I would never be able to do that, when actually they very likely would be able to do it. There are also, let me just look, I talked about working from home. Also, you could also have both working parents. At one point, I was working part-time outside of the home and still homeschooling the children, and my husband was working full-time. Yes, it was exhausting, but I needed at that point in time to help my husband, and my children are worth it. So even though I was tired, I did it because, again, my family comes first. Also, with 2 working parents, even if you have 2 parents who are working full-time, there are a lot of parents who will work separate shifts so that The mother can be home with them during the day maybe, and the father can be home with them at night. And that cuts the need for a babysitter or for daycare or for maybe just worrying about who is going to watch your children while you're at work. This is where it comes time to sit down and be resourceful. If you really want to do it, you are very, very likely to be able to figure out how. And so the last myth that I wanted to talk to you about today is that distance learning / online schooling is homeschooling. So during the pandemic, we saw a lot of people posting about how they're homeschooling their children because the schools are closed. So the schools are sending them the work that they have to do online, and that they're having to spend hours to do it. And it's such a mess and it's so hard, and their kids have to sit and do Zoom classes with their teachers. I assure you, even though the children were at home doing their schoolwork, that was not homeschooling. It was not homeschooling legally, it was not homeschooling logistically, and it was not homeschooling philosophically. And the same thing goes with online schooling. Like a lot of times you'll hear about cyber charter schools. Like I know there's one called like PA Cyber or something like that, and there's like virtual charter schools. Those are also they're not homeschooling. They're not homeschooling legally, logistically, or philosophically. The main difference is, and I did do a video about this, but the main difference with the distance learning and the online schooling is that your child is doing assignments that are given to them by someone else. You, the parent, are not the one that is in charge of your child's education. You are making sure that they do their work, but you are not assigning it, and you are not deciding what they are going to learn about. You are not choosing their curriculum. All of that is coming from a third party. And in that case, it's like, with the distance learning and even with the cyber charter schools, in most cases, the children are considered still to be public school students. They do not, at least in Pennsylvania, they do not file affidavits for homeschool students. They do not file any of the they do not follow any of the homeschool laws. They do not need to worry about any of the requirements that the homeschoolers do. But I would have to say that I believe that there's far more red tape if you do the distance learning and if you do the cyber charter schools. Homeschooling is very, very freeing. And so a lot of people will say, well, why do you feel the need to make the distinction? Aren't you being elitist to say that that's not homeschooling and this is? Well, I don't think that I'm being elitist in saying that. I'm telling the truth because I am a huge advocate of homeschooling. I love to see people withdraw their children from schools and to just take their education into their hands. I think it's a wonderful thing. And if you are receiving wrong information, like the fact that thinking that the distance learning that children were doing during the pandemic was somehow equivalent to homeschooling, or that the cyber charter schools they're not homeschooling. As a homeschooling parent, you get to make your schedule. You take as long as you want for each school day. You can homeschool in the morning, you could homeschool in the evening, you could homeschool on the weekends. You could do it, for 6 weeks and take a 1-week break like I do. You could take 6 weeks off for Christmas like I do. You find a way to make it work on your own schedule. You, as the homeschooling parent, are choosing your child's curriculum. You are deciding what they are going to learn about. You are deciding how they will learn things. And you do not have to worry about, making sure that you're logged in every single day or else you're going to get a truancy letter from the school district or from the cyber school or however it is that your children are learning. You don't need to worry about answering to people in that respect. I live in Pennsylvania, which is one of the strictest homeschooling states when it comes to the laws, and even in Pennsylvania it is extremely manageable, and I really don't need to worry about anything until the end of the year when we do the evaluation, and even that is not a big deal because I have a wonderful homeschool evaluator, and all we have to send into the school district is just a letter from the evaluator stating that my children have progressed adequately throughout the year. So it's such a world of difference. The difference is just being chained to what other people are telling you to do versus the freedom that comes with just deciding what and how your children are going to learn and where they're going to do it at, what time they're going to do it, how long they're going to do it. These are all things that as a homeschooling parent, you get to decide that a distance learning family would never get to do. I get it. I would never have wanted, I would not have survived the Zoom school. No way would I have survived. And if I didn't know anything about homeschooling, I would have put my kids back in school at that point too, because I have a neighbor who was a single mom and had 2 children at home. She was having to do these Zoom lessons with her children. And I know that she was so extremely stressed out from the amount of time that she had to spend with them on the computer. They had to have it in, like all their work had to be turned in. I think it was by 10 p.m. every night. On top of that, she was working. Homeschooling is nothing like that. You set your own schedule. You set your own pace. You decide what you're going to do. And I can't recommend it more than what I have been throughout my channel. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.